the office. So there we are, Mr. Rob Rae. Real deal. How are you, sir?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Doing well. Maybe we'll edit this part out, but we were just commiserating. I don't know if it's commiserating. We were just talking hockey. Depending on when this goes out, hopefully Toronto wins the next 3 and they advance, but it's not looking good for my Washington Capitals by any stretch.
You just need to win the next 4. You'll be good. And then,
yeah, no big deal.
We'll be celebrating our teams moving on. How about that?
Yeah. All right. So, enough of hockey. We're here to talk about some really, really cool stuff that's going on in the industry around Pax8, around kind of these revised customer journeys, kind of where this marketplace is going. You guys have obviously been on fire. The acceleration and the excitement you guys have created in the industry is I think second to none. But, if you would indulge, I mean, most of the listeners, if they don't know of Pax8, they should know of Pax8. And if they don't know of you, they, shame on them. They should know of you. But now you're over a year now into it. Right? I guess take us through kind of, the thought process behind jumping on with Pax8 and kind of where they were and kind of what your thoughts are and the vision moving forward with them.
Yeah, for sure. Would love to. For those that don't know me, I've been in the MSP space now for about 25 years. Pretty much, we're teaching MSPs how to be MSPs back in the early days, but been in IT a little bit longer than that. Worked for an RMM company out of Canada for about 6 or 7 years. Then moved over to Datto and exited from that business just before my 10 years there. And then took a little bit of time off before joining Pax8. But you're right. It's been a year and a couple of months now with Pax8. Seems like it's funny because it seems like yesterday, but it also seems like 10 years all at the same time. So it's kind of odd. But, for me, it was personally, professionally, we built some amazing things over at Datto, some great technology, some phenomenal people still there to this day. So I wish them nothing but success, but professionally, I'm getting to that age where it's like, I was either going to stay with them for the rest of my career, or here was an opportunity to do something different before retirement. And I've known the founders and senior executives over at Pax8 for about as long as they've been in business. And really always enjoyed them, really always enjoyed working with them. And it's funny, they approached me. I had a bunch of people approach me about opportunities to come and work in this space. And in all honesty, when they approached me, it was like, it's distribution. It's not really that sexy. And then they showed me what they were working on. Nick Heddy and Ryan Walsh specifically showed me what they were working on. And I was like, ooh, this is going to be very cool. Very cool. So, we're at the point now where we're finally talking about what that kind of very cool moment was, where we're pivoting away from the traditional distribution vendor and more into like really blazing a path on how people are going to consume technology moving forward. And, again, when they showed it to me, I was like, I got to be a part of this. I want to see this because this is like game changing in my mind for the MSP space. We launched it at Beyond in June of 23, and we're now ready to go GA with portions of it and continue to build. So.
That says a lot, because I imagine you had the pick of the litter. You could have gone just about anywhere that you wanted to, and obviously, I think the safe play for a lot of folks was jump in and ride the cybersecurity wave.
Yep.
I think around that time, AI was becoming a thing. And so you could have gone down that path, but I know we'll kind of get into, maybe some of the AI and stuff that you guys are doing on the back end, but it says a lot that, you could have gone in any different direction. And, to your point, probably what was considered, a kind of legacy business model, if you will, kind of distribution. I mean, distribution's been around forever, and how sexy could it be?
Mm-hmm.
But, the fact that, you saw where this thing was going, and you saw that they're actually going to kind of change the definition of DIST or TSD or whatever is quite impressive.
Yeah. It was a very similar experience to what I had when I first joined Datto back in 2013 where, Austin reached out to me, the founder at Dano, and he's like, hey, take a look at this. And I'm like, dude, it's backup. There's a million backup companies. There's nothing sexy about backup. And then again, just kind of showed me a little glimpse of the future. And, you went from data protection of fires and floods and tornadoes to ransomware and data storage and compliance and all that. So, we're on a similar kind of transition path, just like you said, that, one of the things that Pax8 have kind of always been known for is being a disruptor. It's focused on the MSP space, and it comes into a market where there's a ton of vendors that do what we do, but none of them, arguably any of them, are focused on the MSP space exclusively, where, we have that distinct advantage where if we can build a program around the MSPs and the MSPs only, and the vendors that serve that MSP market, it gives us a distinct advantage in this space. And we're about to do it again with the new marketplace.
Yeah, it's surprising, right? To your point, that you look at the folks that had been, around for a couple of decades now, thinking about the Avants, the Telarises, the Sandler partners, and then some of the larger, in the space, the TDs and Ingrams, what have you. And I don't know if it's taken their eye off the ball or, they just had it, too good in that kind of mid-market up to enterprise space. But, that entire group of TSDs or distributors really, turned their nose up at the traditional MSP channel. I mean, again, they were really kind of going after that trusted advisor, that VAR reseller space up into MME, and Pax8 comes along and plants the flag and becomes the dominant player in this space, pretty quickly. So that's I don't know, that's partly the mission of Blue Ocean, right? It's kind of they found the lane to punch through, and they've done a pretty damn good job of it.
Yeah. Well, if you think about kind of like even just the nuance of what the MSPs need to deal with in comparison to a lot of the other traditional parts of our channel, MSPs, you have to figure out recurring revenue. You've got to figure out margin, enough margin built into the actual products for the MSPs. You've got, I mean, you guys know this probably better than even I do, but word of mouth in this space is significant when it comes to what technologies are you using, why are you using it, what do you think of it. I find that the first place that MSPs go to is generally each other before they make buying decisions like that. So, there's some real distinct nuances that a lot of vendors either just don't want to deal with or don't quite understand or never really took or put the time in to try to understand. But, as you personally and professionally, as I have, both benefited from being singularly focused on this space. So,
yeah. No, you're right. I think it's probably the former. I think, a lot of these vendors, at least what we see, a lot of them come into the market. They're not properly or classically trained on channel. There's always that, the first one in typically gets shot about 9 months in. Yep. Then they go on to the next channel manager, and, they're still fighting for resources and really, enablement. And then their go-to-market, motions are pretty weak at best. But then, they turn to a platform like yours, right? And you guys do a lot, we'll talk through kind of the vendor and the MSP side, but you guys do a lot with the vendors and helping them figure out this marketplace and providing a lot of the resources for them to figure out this marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, we're finding a lot. So if you kind of, again, continue to take a look at the journey that the MSPs have been through, like, I belong to a peer group, a couple of peer groups, where most of the time the people that are in charge of the channel programs for these particular vendors, they tend to be very large vendors, right? So not necessarily exclusively or even solely focused on the MSP space. And these larger vendors all of a sudden are starting to find MSPs in their mid-market enterprise business. Yeah. And that's, it's a combination, I think, of cybersecurity, the importance of cybersecurity. I think it's the maturity of the managed service provider being able to have better conversations with larger organizations. Yeah. And just even the value of what it is that they actually provide. So, this whole growth about co-managed IT, which we've been talking about for 5-6 years now, is coming to fruition. I'm running into MSPs that are doing more business in co-managed than they were even in complete outsourced recurring. So when you look at these enterprise vendors, and now they're trying to figure out, well, how the hell do we work with these MSPs?
Right.
Because we don't have a partner program, we haven't left margin there. We try to have direct relationships with these end users. These larger enterprise companies are calling into these larger targets that they've got, and they're literally turning around to these vendors and saying, "You got to call my MSP." So then these vendors call the MSP, and the MSP is like, "I don't want to do business with you. You don't have a partner program. There's no benefit to me moving from X vendor to you just because you called on one of my end users." So, there's a faster way to market for these people, for these vendors, and ideally that's Pax8. If you want any type of access to the managed service providers, to the SMB market, the SMB IT. If you want access to SMB IT, it's got to be through MSP. If you want access to MSPs, but you don't want to build a partner program, you don't want to build a sales team that's going to focus around serving MSPs. You don't want to deal with the tech support calls. You're not willing or unable to pass the direct relationship with end users back to a third party and an MSP. This is where it's perfect opportunity for us to step in and work with you.
Yeah, like I couldn't agree more. Kind of this whole maturing of this marketplace, and as much as I hate saying, the I guess I'll call it the C word, the COVID word, but yeah, you saw this explosion of endpoints. You saw this, mass, migration of employees outside the firewall that just generated so much velocity. And then, it happened right at that kind of the same time, again, to your point, where the MSP market was maturing. They were starting to move upstream. You had this, hybrid IT coming online. Now you have this explosion of work from home and endpoints, and maturing MSPs starting to move up the mid-market and enterprise. But a lot of the vendors couldn't keep up. They couldn't get into the slipstream. They couldn't get in and create those channel programs like you mentioned. And I might be projecting. I may be outsider looking in, but that seems what you guys have done exceptionally well for some of the vendors on your platform.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And it's that ease. So we understand the MSP market, and vice versa. The MSPs are getting better service from these vendors.
Yeah.
Let's use Microsoft as an example. I mean, it's an easy one that a lot of people beat up on all the time, but you're talking about, Microsoft is arguably 99.5% of all the business that we do in the SMB IT market. It's a company that we just have to deal with. But no, you can't just call Microsoft and get help, right? That's just not the way it works. So having at least a go-between where you have more traditional way of being able to engage, it's not ideal, but it is definitely better than the alternative, which is, dealing with it on your own, Googling what the problem is, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so we've been talking about the vendor side of the equation, maybe kind of segueing into the MSPs, but I think one thing that's really interesting about how you guys are situated, and really actually how channel programs situated, right? We've kind of this front door of the marketplace. We've got thousands of product reviews. We've got, MSPs using the platform to figure out their stack, do the research. But you guys are kind of on the leading edge when it comes to kind of the behind the scenes technology. I know I hear the buzzword AI thrown about, in ways that you're really starting to accelerate the ability of the MSP to find these technologies and start figuring out kind of what's additive, what's next, in the portfolio, and how to go to market. So can take me through that, because that seems like it's a massive undertaking, given the complexity of the different technologies that you're working with, the demands of the MSPs, and kind of the sprawl of their tech stack. So take me how that works, really.
Yeah, there's kind of twofold here, right? One is taking a look at and watching organizations that are leveraging and utilizing, or at least talking about how they're going to leverage and utilize AI moving forward. And it's ebbs and flows, right? We see it all the time where people are getting crazy excited about it. We're speculating what it could be, and then all of a sudden, kind of like this lull happens where we just wait for that development to come. We get excited about another opportunity and whatnot. Copilot is out now, which is great, but there's not many MSPs making a ton of money off of it, but is it something like you have to have and have to talk about? So these are all the things I think that we're going to continue to struggle through as we figure out how AI fits into this world. And it's exactly the same thing that we did 10 years ago when we were trying to figure out how cloud fits into this world. Mm-hmm. And we will figure it out at some point. The dust will settle. We'll all be experts at it. We'll all figure out ways to make money at it, or we just won't do it. So, that's an interesting piece for us from a evolution perspective. I mentioned that, one of the things that we take great pride in at Pax8 is being that distributor, is constantly moving that ball forward. It's not sitting still like a lot of the people that you talked about before. So, I think we're in a position right now, and AI is going to help significantly, where we've invested quite a bit into the engineering side of our business. And, how do you do that? What do you do with this? So there was a meeting probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where our CTO and a bunch of engineers just kind of parked themselves away and said, what's the next evolution of what this looks like? And, very similar to what you were talking about with the pandemic kind of accelerating the way in which the buyer journey is changing. We have newer generations that are changing the way in which they want to engage and make buying decisions. So we need to be ahead of that. And we need to start thinking about that. And we need to start thinking about how does that work in the new world, and how do we make sure that we are all prepared for that? So if you take a look at one of the strengths that an organization such as Pax8 has, is the immense amount of data that we actually have. But the challenge comes is that nobody's really leveraging that data to help the MSPs be better MSPs. Mm-hmm. So if you think about all the different things that we can take a look at, all the different angles of data that we can use, leverage, and take advantage of, but in a way where we can give that information back to the MSP with recommendations on what products should you be selling to your partners or your end users, what upsell should you be looking for, what are the gaps that you're finding, how do you leverage other technologies that maybe you're not even aware of or thinking about, what are other MSPs very similar size and scale to what you're doing, what are they doing differently, how are they pricing this stuff? Like, we have all that information. So why can't we leverage a lot of the AI, a lot of our engineering talent, and really come up with a product and be an innovation-based company that kind of comes up with these things to help our MSP base grow, to help them be better providers to their ultimate end users. So, we're on that journey now. It's actually quite exciting because from what I can see, I think we're well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, look, outward looking in, it seems like you guys are well ahead of it. And, I think to your point, I don't know, you can take snapshots over the last 30 years, and they say, technology is accelerating and all these new different, things pop up and going in this direction. Cyber, it was platforms and this, that, and the other thing. But one thing that's remained really consistent is that there's constantly new entrants, new MSPs, new folks going from break fix, starting to scale, kind of figuring it out. Is there a sweet spot as far as size of MSP, or is it, I am assuming that you guys work with the monoliths, you work with the biggest of the big, and then you've got kind of probably a portfolio of the, smaller ones that are really leaning on you for this insight. But is there a typical persona of an MSP that engages with you guys?
No, not really. Not really. It's pretty much the kind of like the baseline is, do you have an RMM? Do you have a PSA? Those tend to be kind of the baseline of how you're providing managed services out there, because again, a lot of that data is going to be coming through those particular tools. But it's scalable either way. From the smaller shops all the way to the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of MSPs. So it's going to give you as much as you want from it. That's the other part of it too. So if you want more leads coming in, if you want to work with particularly larger vendors or different vendors in what you're working with, it's all completely scalable. I was at an ASCII event speaking to one-man, two-man shops last week in New Jersey, and then I was at Enable's conference just prior to that, speaking to $100 million, $200 million MSPs, and the conversations are relevant. The interest level is high on both sides, and it's I think it's one of the benefits of being in the MSP world, and even what you guys are doing. You know, we can scale up and down and still be relevant to anybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of relevancy, you've got a big event coming up here in about 2 months. I know it's probably one of the hottest tickets in town, and it's I'd assume it's probably almost, if not already, sold out. But tickets through Beyond, I know that's going to be. We had a great experience there last year, and tell us what to expect this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year was our first conference. So Beyond is our user conference, and last year was our first one in Denver, Colorado. It was in June of 2023. It was the opportunity for us to kind of talk about what is different, what we're working on, where we're investing our money and our time, what we're doing to help our partners get better. But back when I was back in my Level Platforms days, this is RMM technology. We used to sell our technology through Ingram Micro. This is like 2007, 2008. And I used to love going to their events because being a distributor back then, you got an opportunity for all the MSPs or back then resellers would come and would be able to engage with all the different vendors that they're working with. But it was kind of this user conference as opposed to, people just constantly trying to sell you something. Right. So, I remember that experience and tried to build that into our marketplace kind of user conference so that all the different vendors that you're working with and more, it's not just our line card vendors, all the other vendors that are out there that are providing services very similar, channel program like your company here, will be there. So, we've got about 110 different vendors that are coming in. But we really want to create like this open ecosystem place where MSPs can come in and do a ton of research and learn a lot, and then have a little bit of fun. So it's 2.5 days, June 9th, 2024. As you mentioned, we are very, very close to being sold out. Hoping that if you really want to come, that you have an opportunity to get in. But it's only our second one. We're also launching a European one in October. We'll do this again in 2025 as well. And really, ultimately, not only do I want it to be the biggest MSP-centric conference in the world, but I want it to be the best. I want it to be the highest quality. I want it to be the go-to event for anybody and everybody that wants to be there. So hopefully you saw a glimpse of that last year as far as what our journey is for this.
Hey, look, that was the first major event you guys had put on. You guys knocked the ball out of the park, obviously. So I can only imagine what you guys are going to do to follow it up. And I do have to say, I mean, we attend quite a few events. I think our industry calendar has something like 1,300 MSP events on it. Yeah, I mean it's pretty wild. We've been to the biggest of the big and the smallest of the small, and yeah, I gotta say the quality of the content, the programming, and just the engagement level. Because you go to some of these larger events, and this might not be scalable, in a couple of years from now, but to have Ryan, walking around, or Ryan Walsh walking around, engaging with the the users or the attendees there, that's something special. Because I think even at your size and velocity, I think a lot of the vendors that kind of your peer space, it's almost still like a walled garden. It's they're kind of off to the side, and you have to knock on the door to speak to the Wizard of Oz kind of a thing. And that's, I think that bringing that kind of sense of community, I think was probably one of the things that I noticed most. Again, being the first one, and there's obviously a lot of excitement, pent up demand coming out of again the pandemic era and all that stuff. But I'm sure this is gonna top last year. I know it's gonna be hard to do, but I'm sure you're gonna do it.
I've got plans. That I'm always gonna try to one up what we did before. And you're right. I mean, we're at 1,500 MSPs we'll have there this year. Probably about 2,400 people in total between staff and vendors. So it's a pretty sizable event. Yeah. However, my executive team, John Street, Brian Walsh, Nick Hetty, Scott Chasen, they love getting engaged with the MSPs. They love being out there and hanging out with them in the social settings. And they do as much of that as they possibly can. And you'll have an opportunity. You'll see them out there. They definitely don't hide behind closed doors. They do enjoy being out there in front of the MSP. So you'll see a lot of them, not only on stage, but also walking around the halls, at the parties, all those, at the dinners, all those things. So
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, but I have to ask, right? Again, maybe we'll edit this out, maybe keep this evergreen, but Stanley Cup prediction. Got to put you on the spot, man.
How about Leafs Oilers?
Leafs Oilers. Oh, man, what a homer you are. Look at that.
And well, how long has it been since a Canadian team actually won the Stanley Cup?
It's going back to the 80s, right? Is it the 80s?
Is it that long? I thought Montreal in the 90s.
In Montreal, and maybe early 2000s.
But it's been too long. It's been too long. So let's make it a no-brainer. Leafs Oilers. Yeah.
Well, I think I have Edmonton and Florida, with Florida taking it. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see who's right at the end of the day. We'll have to compare notes, I guess, out at Beyond, right?
Absolutely. We'll be talking about the basketball championships by that point.
Yeah, full swing there as well. Yeah, man. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Rae, I really appreciate your time, and we'll have all these links in the show notes. I think most people know where to find you. You're pretty darn visible out there on all the socials, but we'll create some links here and make sure we drive some audience back to you. But I can't thank you enough for your time, and we'll see you out in Denver not too terribly long.
Always a pleasure. Thank you again for the opportunity, my friend.
You got it, bud. Thanks.